Lexi's Healthy Dynamic Life podcast. I am so super excited for today's episode. I have the pleasure of being able to interview Ann Osborne. She is a legend, a pioneer in the raw vegan fruitarian movement, and I'm just so happy to have her here. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased that you've invited me to be on here today. Thank you.
Thank you. And so for our listeners today and our viewers, would you please share about your story? What led you to a raw vegan fruitarian based lifestyle, and just take us on your journey?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it all really started when I was 20 years old, and I was already vegetarian, but I was increasingly uncomfortable with practices in the dairy and the egg industry, and I really knew for purely ethical reasons that I needed to give up all animal products and adopt a vegan diet. And when I did so, it wasn't for any health issues or reasons at all. I was 20 years old and I thought I was reasonably healthy. I felt reasonably healthy. It was purely for ethical reasons. So I did it like overnight, went from being vegetarian to vegan. And what really, really surprised me was the very next day, I noticed huge improvements in my health in just one day after giving up all animal products. And at the time I was at university and my student digs were at the bottom of the hill and the university was at the top of the hill. So every day I'd have to walk up the top of the hill to get to uni. And what I noticed was that usually I was out of breath. I got a little bit wheezy in my chest and I was out of breath. But the very next day after I stopped eating all animal products, I was at the top of the hill and it suddenly hit me, wow, I'm at the top of the hill and I'm not wheezing and I'm not out of breath. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I wasn't expecting any health benefits. I didn't become vegan for health at all. It was purely because I was so uncomfortable with the practices in the dairy and egg industries. But wow, and it was like a revelation. It really hit me. And from that moment on, I became very, very interested in the connection between what we put in our bodies and how we feel. And I wanted to find out more because it was such a surprise that I got these health benefits. And so I started reading and researching and trying different types of diet. And I knew that ethically my diet from here on would always be vegan because that was the primarily, the reason that I didn't eat animal products was always for ethical reasons. But I was interested to see the health benefits and look at different types of diets. And so I tried an Wigmore, sprouts, wheatgrass type of vegan diet. I tried a macrobiotic diet for about 18 months, which was very much balancing yin and yang, and was very high in cooked foods, but whole foods and no processed foods. I tried a regular whole food vegan diet and I felt great on all of them. And then when I was 24, I went to a talk by a guy who was a fruitarian, and this was at a local animal rights group. And he looked fantastic. His skin was great. He had so much energy, just that glow and that enthusiasm. And I was like, wow, whatever he's doing is working really well for him. I want to try this. And there was a whole group of us, about 5 or 6. We were all ethical vegans, and we all thought, we want to try this fruitarianism. We want to see what it's all about. And I was pregnant at the time with my eldest son. And so I did a transition because I thought, being pregnant, I didn't want to go straight to a fruit diet in case I eliminated too much, in case, I was releasing toxins. So I had a transition period of about 12 to 14 months where I ate mostly fruit, but also some cooked vegan foods as well. And increased the amount of fruit and decreased the amount of cooked foods. And I've never looked back. I just loved everything about the fruit diet. Everything about it ticked all the boxes. Ethically, it ticked all the boxes. Environmentally, I mean, I have hardly any waste in my rubbish bin. There's nothing. You compost. You buy fruit as it is. There's no packaging. And health-wise, it's got to tick all the boxes, even if it's like ethically and environmentally a wonderful diet. If you don't feel great on it, if it's not giving you the nutrients you need, you can't have it as a sustainable diet. And I think what helped at the beginning of my diet was that there was 5 or 6 of us, and we were all starting out on this diet. We were all enthusiastic. We had that social support, which I think is very important when you're embarking on a new diet, that you have other people that are going through what you're going through. And also we formed an organic buying group. So we were able to access wonderful fruits from all over the world, because I was in England at the time, and there are some great fruits in summer and spring in England. But in some of the cooler months, we didn't get the variety. So we were getting these wonderful organic fruits, mangoes from Egypt, apricots from Italy, grenadilla from Burkina Faso. You know, it was just a pleasure. And I got into the diet very much through mono fruit meals. I didn't get in through any gourmet raw or really prepared raw meals. It was always just boxes of organic fruit. And because that fruit was always so good, the quality was outstanding, to mix it with anything or add anything to it really wasn't necessary. It was just beautiful in mono meals. And I've really carried on like that for the past 28 years, eating fruit in mono meals, eating good quality fruit, eating organic, local, wild, biodynamic, foraged fruit, the best possible quality I can find. And it's something that's really worked for me, and I've brought up 2 children on the diet. So it's been a really great journey, and nothing that I've eaten before has even touched how I feel on a fruit diet. So that's how I got into the fruit diet, and that's why I remain on the fruit diet.
That's amazing. And thank you so much for taking us through that process. It sounds like it really just flowed organically, no pun intended. And it's really cool that you also raised your children in this lifestyle. I know a lot of people in different Facebook groups, on different forums, express their desire to raise their children on a fruit-based diet, but have a lot of concerns about whether it's nutritionally viable or
Mhm.
all sorts of concerns. What would you say to someone who might be struggling with that?
Well, I think it's really good to do your research. I think you need to have a faith in this diet to make it succeed for you. And I don't mean a blind faith. When I talk about faith, I mean a faith that's built up by personal experience, by research, by knowledge, looking at science, networking with other people, looking at biology, dietetics, chemistry, all sorts of things. I think that's very important, that you do your research. I think a second thing is very important, is that you can access great quality fruits. I think this is so important. The fact is that we are depleting a lot of the soils on this planet. We're taking out of them. We're not putting back. And if the nutrients are not in the soil, they're not going to be in the fruit that we eat. And it's so important that we access as much homegrown, organic, local, wild, naturally grown, biodynamic fruits as we possibly can. And I really think that I wouldn't have been able to bring up my children on this diet if I hadn't been able to access really good quality fruit. I think that's very important. And I think what can confuse the issue is some people think that if fruit is sweet and tastes sweet, then it's going to be nutritious in other areas. And I think we have to look at the differences there, because the sugar content of fruit is formed by photosynthesis, and that is really dependent on sunshine and water and carbon dioxide. So fruit can be grown, the soil can be very, very deficient, but it can still get a lot of sunshine, it can still get water and carbon dioxide. So therefore, if it's left to ripen properly, it can taste sweet. But that's the macronutrients. So the sugar in a fruit is a macronutrient. Now the micronutrients are the ones that come from the soil. So they're the vitamins and minerals and things that a plant absorbs through the soil. Now, if the soil's deficient, the fruit might be high in macronutrients, it might be high in sugar, but it might be deficient in micronutrients. And I think the area that we really have to look at, and especially with growing up, bringing up children, is if fruit is grown in good soil so that it has got a high level of micronutrients in it. I think we can talk about the macronutrients 80-10-10. It's not that hard to get your macronutrients as long as you're eating enough. It's not hard to get enough carbohydrate, protein and fat from fruit as long as you're eating enough. I think where we're challenged, and especially with bringing up children who are growing, and it's really important that they get the micronutrients. So that's the antioxidants, the minerals and the vitamins as they're developing. That's where the challenge lies. And that's why it's very important to me, if you're bringing up children, you can access great quality fruit. And if you can't, you may have to reassess bringing up a child on a fruit-based diet. You may need to add more greens into that diet to ensure that your child gets enough micronutrients. Another thing that I think is vitally important, if you're considering bringing up a child on this diet, are you prepared to long-term breastfeed? Babies are milkarians. They're not fruitarians, they're milkarians. For the first year and more, the primary source of nutrients for any child is milk. And I think that children need milk for the first 3.5 to 4 years. And if you look at societies where they don't have domestic cows or they don't have domestic goats, they will breastfeed for 4 years. And I think that that is really, really important. If you're on a conventional diet, you can give your child animal products, you know, if that's not an ethical concern for you. If you're a cooked vegan, you can give your child plant milks. But if you're fruitarian, your child really needs milk, I believe, for 3.5 to 4 years. Are you prepared to long-term breastfeed? And it is something that can be a challenge in our society because we're not used to seeing 3 and 4 year olds being breastfed. In societies where they don't have domestic animals, all children are breastfed to about 4 years because children do need milk up to that age. So it's quite normal, it's quite natural to see a child of 3 or 4 being breastfed. But it's not in our society, and it's seen as unnatural or strange or weird, when in reality it's the most natural thing in the world. And if you were out in a public setting and you gave your child a glass of milk, a glass of cow's milk, nobody would bat an eye. But if you were breastfeeding your child, you might get some, you know, some comments, you might get people who felt uncomfortable with it because it's not normal. So I think it's really important, breast milk. And the children that I've seen that have thrived on a fruit-based diet have all been long-term breastfed. The children that I've seen that have had issues have not been long-term breastfed with mother's milk, or the mother has had issues producing enough milk. So I think 3 very important things are having faith in the diet, but not blind faith. Do your research, find out about it, network with other people, study the science of it, because for me, although this works on a very spiritual level as well, it's a rational diet, it's based in science, the science all backs it up. And nothing that I've read or researched over the past 28 years has led me to believe anything other than we are frugivores and this diet is scientifically sound for us. So have the faith, be able to access great quality fruits, grow your own, form a buying group, do whatever you can. For me, it's always been vitally important to access good quality fruit, and it's always come to me. And I believe in the law of attraction. If you want something and you're attracted to it, it will be attracted to you. And similarly, if you say to yourself, I can't access good quality organic fruit, or I can't afford it, you are programming that. And you can afford it and you can access it if you really want it. And with my elder son, I was a single parent. I was on an extremely low income, and yet I still managed to feed us high quality fruit with a high percentage of organic fruit. So I've been through it, and I can say it is possible. If you really want something, it's possible. And if you say, I will access good quality fruit, I envisage eating good quality fruit, I can afford it, good quality organic fruit will come into my life, you're setting yourself up to attract that into your life. And then the third thing is, are you prepared to long-term breastfeed? And the thing is, if you have an older child, you don't necessarily have to breastfeed in public. When the children are older, they may want just a feed in the morning, a feed in the evening, a feed if they get upset. So if you're not comfortable being out in public, you don't have to breastfeed a toddler in public if you're not comfortable with it. And you can also be discreet. You know, you don't have to be very overt with it, although I don't think there's anything wrong with being overt about it, because I think it's perfectly natural and you're doing the best thing for your child in breastfeeding your child. So I think there are three very important points to take into consideration if you're considering bringing up a child on this diet and lifestyle. But there are some very good resources out there. There are a lot of people who have brought up children on raw vegan diets and the children are thriving. But yeah, you know, and I think for me, it was just a pleasure to bring up my children on this diet. They had lots of energy, but they weren't hyperactive. They had none of the usual childhood illnesses. They weren't vaccinated at all, but they never got any of the childhood illnesses, despite coming into contact with many of the children who had chickenpox, measles, mumps. They never got them. Their immune systems were very, very good. They were just a joy to be around. It was just a pleasure to bring up children. One of the things that I was concerned about before I had kids, and this was before I was on a fruit diet when I was vegan, I'd go and visit people, and meal times seemed to be such a struggle with kids. You've got to eat this before you can have this, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And I just thought, this seems really stressful. This whole feeding children thing seems so stressful. And yet with the fruit thing, it was just never ever stressful. It was just a lovely flow to it. And you know, if my children were hungry, they ate. If they weren't hungry, they didn't eat. We always had a great selection of organic fruit and high quality fruit around the house, so they could choose what they wanted to eat. And something I noticed was, and I kind of call it the lone grape syndrome, was with my children, they just ate exactly the amount they wanted to eat. There was no coercion, no pressure. They had to finish this, they had to finish that. There was a very natural flow to it. And I would notice that if I gave them a bunch of grapes or a bag of cherries, they would often leave just one cherry or one grape on the bunch. And I thought, I'd never do that. I'd just eat, if there's one left, I'll just eat it. But they would have this natural stop point, and they wouldn't feel any pressure to eat any more than they needed. And I thought that was a really beautiful thing. And I noticed it with both my children that they did this. You know, and there was nothing wrong with the grape. You know, it wouldn't be bad or squishy. It'd just be left because they'd had enough. So I think there's, you know, natural child rearing is a really beautiful thing, and it takes away a lot of the stresses that are normally associated with child rearing, such as illness or hyperactivity. And I think bringing up a child on a fruit diet combined with like the continuum concept or attachment parenting is just beautiful, because they just go together so much. The child needs that contact, and they also need a natural diet, so they work in tandem. So I would personally highly recommend it, but do your research. I'm not saying it's the best thing for everybody and everybody's child. And, you know, just to speak to other people that, if you are interested, that have brought up children on this diet, and see what their experiences are.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So powerful, your experience on witnessing rearing thriving children on a fruit-based diet, and hearing about how all of these issues that we tend to see as normal, like the illness, the hyperactivity, emotional distress, can be alleviated, or, you know, more easy to deal with just by changing diet to fruit, which you described as both the rational diet for humans, but also a spiritual choice. Would you be willing to dive into that a little bit more?
Yes, I think for me there are so many levels that the fruit diet kind of ticks the boxes. It is a very spiritual diet, and one of the spiritual things I like about it is the symbiotic relationship, and I get kind of goose pimples with it, between eating fruit and spreading the seeds. So between humans and the fruit plants, because plants can't move unless they're triffids. They can't move generally. They're stuck in one place, and they have to spread their seed. Now, plants don't want to spread their seed right near where they're growing. That creates issues, because there's issues in terms of space. If all the baby trees are growing up next to each other, they've got to share nutrients, there isn't enough light, you know. So the plant wants its babies to grow away from the parent plant. Now, there's different ways of seed dispersal. One is wind, which works very well, you know, with the little dandelion that you clock that you blow. But that only works for very light seeds. You know, you imagine trying to blow a durian seed or a mango seed, you're not going to be able to do it unless there's a sort of like a hurricane or something. Another method of dispersal is water. So coconuts are naturally dispersed by water, which is why we often see coconut palms growing near sea, because when the coconut's properly ripe and mature, it will fall off, it will floats very, very well, and it will float off somewhere else, end up on a beach somewhere, and hopefully start growing into another palm. And a third method is by animals. So one reason how animals spread seeds is by sort of like physical methods. So burrs or anything that's spiky will get into the animal's fur when it's sort of moving around somewhere, and it will get dispersed many, many miles away. And the guy that thought of Velcro did so because he saw a burr on his dog's coat, and he made a lot of money out of doing that. And the second method how animals disperse seeds is by eating the seed, or by taking the fruit away, eating it, and then throwing the seed. And that's a fantastic method. It works really, really well. And it's such a symbiotic method because we as animals, we get the benefits of all the nutrition from the fruit, and the fruit plant gets us to spread the seed. So it's a win-win situation, and it's beneficial to both. And that is why if a fruit is meant for humans to eat, and not all fruit is, some fruits, some berries are toxic to humans. The reason why is that it is far more effective for birds to spread the seeds, because birds can fly many, many more miles. So it's advantageous for that plant to have birds spread the seed rather than bigger mammals. So if those seeds and if those berries are toxic to humans, then we won't eat them. So they will get spread, instead of mammals, they will get spread by birds. But fruit that is designed for us to eat, if it's properly ripe, and some fruit, if it's underripe, is very toxic, like the ackee, which can kill you if it's underripe, or a persimmon or a chocolate sapote can be disgusting when they're underripe. But when they're ripe, they're delicious and they're not at all toxic. So if a fruit is designed for humans and it's properly ripe, there aren't any toxins in it. And why would there be? Because it wouldn't be advantageous for a fruit plant to spend all this energy creating a beautiful fruit and wanting the seeds to be spread if it made that fruit toxic, because the fruit eater would then get sick and wouldn't be able to spread the seeds, or certainly wouldn't come back next year to the tree to get more fruit. So there's no toxins. All other foods have some degree of toxicity in them. Leaves, for example, have toxins in them because the plant doesn't want you to eat the leaves. If you come along and you eat all the leaves off a plant, it will die. It won't be able to photosynthesize and it will die. A plant doesn't want its roots eaten either, because if you dig up it like a potato and you eat the roots, again, it dies. It doesn't die if you pick the fruit. What it does is want you to pick the fruit. So plants are pretty clever, and they put toxins in leaves which try and prevent a lot of leaves from being eaten. And that's not to say that, you know, you can't eat leaves. Some people eat leaves and do very well on them, but there are still toxins in them. And animals that eat a lot of leaves often go to clay licks, like tapirs, for example. They eat a lot of leaves that have tannins and toxins in them, and they go to clay licks and they lick the clay, and the negative ions in the clay combine with the positive ions in the toxins and expel them from their body. Monkeys in Zanzibar steal charcoal, they eat the charcoal, and again the charcoal has a similar effect. It binds with the toxins from the leaves that they eat and expels them from the body. And actual monkeys in Zanzibar that steal the charcoal and eat it are healthier than the ones that don't, because they have a method of expelling toxins from the body. And that's why it's often said, if you eat leaves, rotate your leaves. So if you eat a lot of kale, if you eat a lot of spinach, eat it for a while and then eat something else to minimize the effect of toxins. Again, seeds. A plant doesn't want you to eat all its seeds, because if you do, it won't be able to reproduce. So there are certain toxins in seeds. There are anti-sprouting things in seeds as well, and phytic acid and various stuff in seeds. But fruit is toxin free, and we have that beautiful symbiotic relationship, which for me is really special about eating fruit. Also, there's the non-killing aspect. When you're eating fruit, you're not killing the plant. If you're eating tree crops, especially if you're eating organic fruit, if you're eating local fruit, because someone once said there's no such thing as a good vegan, any good vegan is a dead vegan. And by that, they meant that we're always causing harm, even if we don't mean to. We try and do the minimum amount of suffering that we can, but just in transportation of food, in ploughing, in tilling, animals are killed, and we were always doing our best, but there is some amount of suffering. But eating locally grown or organic fruit, I think, is the minimum amount of suffering, because we're not using sprays to kill animals and insects. And if we're having local, there's less transportation. So we're minimizing suffering, we're minimizing killing by eating fruit from tree crops. So that's another spiritual aspect for me, that in terms of harm caused, the fruit diet is one of the minimal harm diets that there is. So I think, it's a very spiritual diet for me, and there's such a joy and connection as well. I think since being on a fruit diet, I feel so much more connected with animals, with plants, with everything. It's just beautiful and joyous. So there's that whole spiritual side. But then there's the scientist part of me that likes the rationality. It likes reading all these really old natural hygiene books, and books by people that actually were doing scientific research into fruit diets like 150 years ago. And they did a great job. And all the science, all of it that I've read, from our digestive system to our dental formula to our hands, our stereoscopic colour vision, it all leads me to believe that we are frugivores by design. We have this, amazing colour vision so that we can see fruit when it's ripe. So when fruit goes ripe, it changes from green to yellow or red, which is really contrasting against the green leaves, so we can see it. An animal like a cat that is an obligate carnivore has quite poor colour vision, because its prey moves. So what it needs is really good movement vision. And if you've ever watched a cat, it'll see a movement at the bottom of the garden and it'll be there, but if you put something right in front of its nose, it won't see it. But it's got really good movement vision because its food moves. Now, our food doesn't move unless it's swaying a bit in the breeze, but we need the colour vision. So our eyes are designed to see fruit. Our hands with our opposable thumbs are designed to pick and peel fruit. Our bodies are designed for climbing, so we can climb fruit trees and get fruit. We have the brain capacity to find fruit, remember where it is. And what's interesting is that fruit-eating animals have bigger brains than non-fruit-eating animals. We get all this stuff about, our brains got big because we ate meat. But if you look at monkeys, Dr. Catherine Milton did research in South America on howler and spider monkeys, and both of them are about the same size and mass. But the spider monkey eats predominantly fruit, and the howler monkey eats predominantly leaves. And when they found dead monkeys and they did autopsies on them, they found that the fruit-eating spider monkeys had twice as big brains as the leaf eaters, even though their mass was similar. And that's because as fruit eaters, we need to know certain things. We need to know where the fruit is and when it's in season. So we've got these dual levels of knowledge. We need to know location and date. So it's no good remembering where the mango trees are if you can't remember when the mangoes are in season. And so animals that eat leaves don't need that knowledge. Because if you're in the tropics or subtropics, leaves are always in season, they're always there. You don't need to have the same amount of geographical and time knowledge as you do if you're a fruit eater. So there's all these scientific studies showing that we are by design frugivores. And so I like the fact that this diet fits in with my spiritual beliefs, but it also fits in a rational point of view. It's a very rational diet, and people tend to think of it as an extreme diet or as a crazy diet. But when you look at the facts of science, the design of our body is a frugivore. So why wouldn't we then want to eat, a fruit-based diet? So it makes sense on many levels to me, as well as, health and environmental. There's the spiritual and the scientific, which, is fantastic.
It really is fantastic. And I just really appreciate how you explained both the rational approach and the spiritual approach. I actually heard you share that spiritual approach with the symbiotic relationship for the first time at the Woodstock Fruit Festival last year. And it just, you're right, it makes so much sense when it's explained so easily. It's like, yes, of course. And I feel it in my bones when you share that information, and it just feels right. It reminds me of what you said earlier about how it just flows. And I think that's something that we all really want and truly desire in life, is that ease, that natural flow, peace. And when we are suffering with pain and illness, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it truly is a sign of, to me, I think it's a sign of that resistance, that something is just not quite right. It's not quite in flow yet. So I'm just so grateful that while the numbers are relatively small, we're growing and sharing more about how it just makes so much sense to eat and enjoy and thrive on fruit. So thank you again for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And so I just wanted to ask you that, when we were talking about children, it's so important bringing up children with high quality fruit, organic, local when possible. And you shared your experience of creating a buy-in group. Could you share a little bit more about that experience, or any tips you would be willing to share if someone is interested in doing that on their own?
Yes, I started the buying group in the UK, but I think it would be similar in most other areas, to find somebody like a wholesaler in your area that imports organic fruit from various places, and connect with them and ask them, if we order 5 or 6 or 7 boxes a week, would this be possible? And the advantage is, if you've got several people, you can get better variety. You might go to a wholesaler and be able to afford 2 boxes of fruit, because you have to buy it in boxes, and that's why it's cheaper. But if you've got 6 or 7 people, you can buy maybe 10 boxes. So you get, every week you've got 10 different types of fruit, which I think is very important. You're getting variety, you're more likely to get your micronutrient levels met. So I would maybe put a card up at a local Whole Foods shop, or put a message in a local Facebook group or a local community, and get a group of maybe 6 or 7 people together, form a buying group, and look at local wholesalers who wholesale organic, high quality fruits, and then place an order every week. And that's what we did. We got a group of people together. We went to a local wholesaler of organic fruit and veg, and we ordered every week so many boxes. And what we do is alternate it. So one week all the boxes would be delivered to one person's house, and everybody else would go to their house to collect their fruit, and that person would be responsible for dishing up the fruit, so dividing it up between everybody, creating the individual boxes so that when the people came to their house, they could take it away. And it's a good way as well to work within your community to get to know people. And I think any kind of community action is rewarding in itself, regardless of the fruit that you're going to get from it. Just forming groups and sharing. And obviously there's COVID concerns at the moment, but you could still work within that, doing social distancing if you needed to order fruit, and making sure that everybody was within local regulations or restrictions and things. So I really, really recommend that, not only because you'll get great quality fruit at a cheaper price, because whenever you buy a big box of fruit, it can be considerably cheaper than just going to a local store and buying it, because they're probably having a 50% markup or more on the fruit. So immediately you buy a box of it, it's going to be, sort of like a much lower cost. So yeah, I definitely recommend that. And then you've got the social thing as well, the support, because if you're a group of people all wanting to eat more fruit or get into more veganism, you can meet up every week, even if you have to do your social distancing, and you can connect with each other and share experiences. So for me, that's a really useful part of starting out and succeeding on this diet. And I'm not sure, if I hadn't had that buying group and hadn't had the sort of the support of my friends and had that delicious fruit, and that really for me was like, wow, fruit is so good, and it has to be so good. This isn't a sort of ashes and sackcloth denial diet. It's a diet of abundance and joy, and it should be delicious. There's no reason to eat substandard fruit. You've only got so much space in your stomach, so eat the best. And that's another reason why eating mono stands up, because if you eat mono, you have to eat good quality fruit. You can't say, well, this melon tastes a bit rubbish, but if I mix it with some papaya and blend it in a smoothie, it might be all right. It has to taste good by itself, so you're not putting anything into your body that doesn't taste absolutely fantastic. So I think that's another good reason for eating mono. And that's how I got into the diet, eating mono, because the fruit was so delicious. You didn't want to mix it with anything else. You just wanted to eat that mango or that, sweet grenadilla or the apricots. They were just great. And I think, sadly, with sort of supermarkets selling fruit that's been in cold storage for months, with commercial fruit being picked far too underripe. And I appreciate fruit does need to be picked in some cases a bit underripe because of travel and stuff, but very, very underripe. And the gassing of fruit, and this is something that I think really affects the quality of fruit, that a lot of fruit is gassed now. The gassing affects the quality of it, the taste, the flavor, but also it means that fruit is picked very, very much underripe. And avocados is an example. 20 years ago, there was very little gassing of avocados compared to what happens today. Today, most avocados, even organic ones, are gassed. And the reason is they can pick them a lot earlier. If you pick an avocado that could have been on the tree for an extra 2 months, what happens is it doesn't have as much nutrition in it because it's been picked early. It doesn't taste as good. Now, if you pick that 2 months early ordinarily and didn't gas it, and you put it in at your local store, you buy it from the store, it would take 2 weeks or more to ripen. And you think, wow, I'm not going back to that store again. I picked an avocado and it took 2 weeks to ripen. But if they gas ripe it, it can ripen in 2 or 3 days. But the texture isn't there, the stone will be pale, the flavour isn't there, and the nutrients aren't there because it's not been left to tree ripen properly. And I think that's a huge, issue with quality of fruit. And, again, if you have organic, it's less likely to be gas ripened, but it still can be. But, the quality of fruit is so important. And I think we've got to have really good quality fruit, to thrive on this diet. It's really important.
Definitely. I think a lot of us, at least I can resonate with what you shared about unripened fruit at the supermarket, at the grocery store. Rock hard avocados are expected these days, and you wait, and it never tastes the same. So it's really so true. Good quality fruit make such a difference when embarking on this lifestyle. And
Mm,
I think it's really a priority to enjoy mono meals as we're designed to, and to really
mm,
enjoy the experience of eating just such deliciousness that nature's offered for us to share.
yeah.
And so thank you for sharing that. And I just love what you mentioned before too about, you know, we can have these limiting beliefs like, I live in the northeastern US, how can I get organic internationally grown fruit? It seems impossible. But when there truly is a strong enough desire, the law of attraction works, whether you believe in it or not, you know, well, it'll happen, and you'll just meet
Yes.
the right person or come across something
Mm,
on Google. And so I appreciate you sharing those tangible tips, and also that mindset shift that can really make a difference, and make this life abundant and enjoy. It's abundance. Like, I learn about new fruits I haven't even heard of every single day all around the
yeah.
world. So it truly is amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to share? Any lasting words of wisdom or advice?
I think organic fruit is very important, and I'm becoming more and more aware of it. I live in the countryside, and living in the countryside, you get exposed to farmers who aren't farming organically. And the sprays that are used, when you actually see them being used, when you smell them being used, you realize how toxic they are. When you see what they do to a field, for instance, strawberry fields are totally blasted. The soil is made sterile, and that's like terrible, because we need all the microorganisms in the soil. Soil needs to be alive. So I would say we can't always see what goes on with conventionally grown fruit. And if we could, if sprays and pesticides were like bright orange, luminous on all our fruit, we'd go, oh, yuck. But you can't see it, but it's in there. And also a lot of fruit like bananas, they use systemic poisons. So people will often say, if I had $1 for every person that said you can just peel a banana, I'd probably be able to buy my own banana farm. But you can't just peel a banana and get rid of the chemicals, because they're in the cells, they're in the flesh. That's what happens with systemic poisons. They get into the cells of the flesh. So peeling a fruit will do nothing to remove them. So I think really try and get non-sprayed or organic fruits, or if you can't, look at the list of which fruits are best if you can't get organic and which are worse. I won't eat organic, non-organic strawberries, apples, bananas, if at all possible, because of the chemicals used on them. And I've seen it. I live in the countryside, and it makes me very sad when I see the chemicals that are used by a lot of the farmers. So I would say really try and get organic produce, or produce as well that's grown in good soil, because soil is the life force of the planet. And if we're sterilizing soil to grow fruit and vegetables in, we're not going to get those micronutrients. And people might say, well, the fruit's growing, why would it grow if it hadn't got the nutrients it needs? And well, what they do, it's like fruit on steroids. They put down artificial fertilizers which contain like potassium, sodium and nitrogen, but nothing else. So it makes those plants grow, but in terms of micronutrients, they just haven't got the micronutrients in that we need. So I would say really try for organic or non-sprayed if possible. Obviously we always have to do the best we can. If you can't get organic, then look at the dirty dozen and look at the best ones. There's a lot of cleaner fruits that, even when they're not organic, have a lot less pesticide residues in them. And just appreciate that this really is a diet of abundance and flow. And once you tune into it, you'll find that your life becomes very abundant, and there's a lot of flow, and you'll realize that you're very much in sync with the universe. And it's a very blessed way to live. I'm not saying it's the best way for everybody, but certainly for me, I'm feel so thankful to have discovered this diet and that it ticks all the boxes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in to listen. I hope that you carry something of this with you today, the rest of the week, maybe the rest of your life, and just see all of the positive effects that come from eating delicious, ripe, fresh, organic fruit. So thank you again, Anne. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it, and have a happy, healthy, and dynamic day.
Thank
Bye.
you very much. It's been a pleasure. Bye.